Back in 2013, not long after the launch of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Ubisoft embarked on the development journey for what was initially conceived as an expansion, continuing the pirate theme. However, this concept swiftly morphed into an ambitious multiplayer endeavor, presumably driven by the desire to capitalize on a lucrative trend in gaming. As time progressed, the game underwent various transformations in a bid to keep up, to chase the ever-shifting gaming landscape. And what we're left with today resembles a relatively boring-looking, repetitive live service game, replacing the idea of being a pirate with fantasy customizations and menus taking the place of gameplay. A stark departure from its original Black Flag roots. Astonishingly, reports indicate that the game has devoured a staggering $200 million in development costs, yet it's only managed to attract around 850,000 players, and that figure apparently includes the people who sampled the free trial. It's a far cry from the peak concurrent players of a niche little RPG game that's based on Dungeons & Dragons. And no, despite the gameplay footage in the background, I'm not amongst that 850,000 players. You can be forgiven for thinking the 11-year-old Assassin's Creed Rogue is Skull and Bones, since graphically, Skull and Bones hasn't really made significant strides forward. However, I have watched Skull and Bones through many hours of Twitch, and I could easily spend this entire video dissecting it, just based on what I've seen, but frankly, there's no need. Its fate was sealed long before its release. The increasingly worrying trailers provided a clear glimpse into the mess behind the scenes and how it was destined to be subpar. Like many other games born of corporate avarice, it seamlessly fits into what I like to call the Google review scoop. Let's take a moment to contrast Skull and Bones with what can be considered to be an objectively good live service game. In the case of Warframe, the average rating is high, and it is devoid of the review scoop. You can generally trust these ratings, taking the occasional 1-star with a grain of salt. However, in Skull and Bones' case, the only real decent measurement of a scoop review tends to be the average, as the reviews are split between 1s and 5s. Breaking them down, at the bottom end of the spectrum you'll find disillusioned players who expected more from their purchase only to discover they've squandered 70 quid on a mediocre experience. Then there's also those who just want to see the world burn and never had any intention of playing it. And of course there's the group of people who I most sympathise with, suffering from consumer fatigue for live service games. In the scoopy middle is the realm of the sensible people, basically a scarce breed. These individuals recognize the game is functional and they're not driven by wild emotional swings to one end of the spectrum or the other. Perhaps the game has a reasonable single-player campaign like Avengers, or it still gets support from the developers like Fallout 76 apparently does. In an ideal world, these games would have a significant spike in the 2-star, maybe 3-star ratings, indicating a consensus on their mediocrity. But the most intriguing bunch are the 5-star reviewers. Among them, there are the die-hard brand loyalists, who I think we can pretty much just ignore. There are also those who are determined to combat the influx of 1-star ratings with embellished praise. However, I think the bulk of these glowing reviews stem from individuals who are not deceiving the readers, they are deceiving themselves. Sunk cost fallacy, or loss aversion bias, is a phenomenon we've all encountered at some point. I'd even go so far as to say we've all had it at some point. It's essentially when someone buys into an idea, financially or sometimes emotionally, and despite it being objectively average or worse, they convince themselves it's a wise investment. I didn't just waste my money, I'm smart. Everyone saying bad things is wrong. Or, viewed through a capitalist lens, it's akin to justifying a colossal investment in a product nobody wants. They're all mistaken. This is a quadruple A game, destined for immense success, and not a waste of $200 million. While I can't claim to be privy to the inner workings of every company that has made a Google review scoop game, as a software engineer in a different public-facing industry, I have first-hand experience of negative reviews caused by corporate decisions. The developers behind these games often bear the brunt of the criticism that really should be directed higher up the chain. In legal terms, there is a concept known as fiduciary duty. It's a mandate to best serve the interest of beneficiaries. In the world of public corporations, the beneficiaries are investors or shareholders, and the interest is financial gain. Companies are obligated to maximize returns for these stakeholders. This is why the most honest appraisal of what a company is going to do comes from the shareholder meetings rather than from the glitzy Jeff Keighley events. And it's why you will currently be seeing a lot of companies shoehorning AI into their plans. It's the latest financial fad. If you mention it to shareholders, it will almost immediately increase the company worth based on speculative profit. The crux of the matter lies in the speculative nature of late-stage capitalism combined with the fiduciary duty. That is what keeps the corporate sunk cost fallacy machine rolling. Rather than cutting ties with flagging projects or sticking to their core competencies, some companies persist in chasing a dragon they will almost certainly never catch. And in doing so, they produce subpar games often influenced by shifting trends or ill-fated attempts to capitalize on lucrative markets. This single-minded focus on the idea that the live service model is worth however many billions ignores market saturation and consumer constraints. People only have so much money and time. If there are 50 live service games, people will at most play 2 on a regular basis, more likely only 1. It's a corporate gamble that they can be the one game that everyone wants to play. The game that replaces Warframe or Destiny 2 or whatever. And to be honest, I kinda get it. Successful live service games yield greater long-term profits compared to their single-player counterparts. There are edge cases, but take Alan Wake 2 for example. It's a great game. It's Remedy's fastest selling game. It's sold over 1.3 million copies in the few months it's been out. It hasn't broken even yet. It's financially dwarfed by games like Warframe that have been around for a decade and continue to generate substantial revenue year after year. In a system inherently geared towards greed, it's really no surprise that companies persist in taking that risk, driven by the allure of potential windfalls, and when blinded by the dollar signs of a live service model worth billions, the time and the money spent on their attempt to tap into it are completely removed by the sunk cost fallacy. It's perfectly demonstrated by Ubisoft CEO's recent quote calling Skull and Bones a quadruple A game. Ultimately, this brings us to the grim reality where developers who otherwise excel at crafting engaging single-player experiences find themselves coerced into producing soulless, microtransaction-laden live service monstrosities as mandated by their corporate overlords. It's a scenario I'd wager no developer willingly embraces, yet they're compelled to comply with shareholder demands. However, when these ventures inevitably falter or just fade from public consciousness, the repercussions are severe. Take the case of Bungie's Destiny 2. In 2023, despite being among Steam's top earners, it fell short of revenue predictions by a staggering 45%. The response? Predictably, was layoffs. In just the first 6 weeks of 2024, the gaming industry has announced over 6,000 job cuts, a trend that I believe is indicative of the harsh realities of fiduciary duty. While fluctuations in staffing levels are common in the tech industry, particularly within project life cycles, the recent waves of layoffs primarily affecting large, prosperous companies suggests a bit of a different motive: maintaining fiduciary obligations at any cost. There's perhaps some argument to be made that some of these actions stem from overhiring during the pandemic, but I've been in the exact position of a company in the very same week announcing record profits and announcing layoffs. I've seen an entire team of testers disappear under the label of efficiency improvement, the efficiency, I guess, being there's no formal testing anymore, just to make the cost line go down and the earnings before tax line go up. Unless there's a fundamental shift in the executive mindsets away from chasing fleeting trends or saturated multiplayer models, I see little change on the horizon. Instead, we're likely to witness more failures and subsequent layoffs, perhaps with emphasis on AI or the emergence of quadruple A Power World clones. Sony apparently have 12 live service games in the works at the moment. So what's the takeaway from all this? Frankly, I'm not entirely sure. Late stage capitalism ruins good things? Personally, I can't help but lament the absence of a single-player Black Flag expansion, a reminder of what could have been amidst a landscape dominated by profit-driven, poorly made live service games. Let me know your thoughts and opinions, and if you've played any of these now dead service games in the comments, plus don't forget the likey subscribey nonsense. Thanks for watching, bye!